Aviation faces a sobering reality. Our carbon budget is rapidly depleting and could be exhausted by 2032. This isn't speculation, this is a carbon countdown. In our new book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2, Dirk Singer and I document how dramatically the landscape has transformed since our first book came out 18 months ago. We've witnessed a shift from bold experimentation to disciplined execution. What makes this book essential? We reveal how sustainable solutions succeed not because they are green, but because they are better, economically superior. The winners aren't those with the most advanced technology. They are those solving the right problems with compelling economic advantages. From SAF production and contrail mitigation to direct air capture, we have distilled hard-won lessons into a practical roadmap for aviation's journey to net zero. Get your copy today. Link in the show notes.
And in 2024, we released our industry's first ever sustainable procurement standards for airlines, hotels, and car rentals to help corporate travel buyers worldwide make informed procurement decisions, and to also, on the supply side, to help with the sometimes thousands of RFPs that they're getting with different questions to help standardize what that set of questions are. So it helps both the supply side and the buy side to streamline the sustainable procurement process.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Suzanne Neufang. Suzanne is the CEO of GBTA, which stands for the Global Business Travel Association. It's the only global association representing professionals across the 1.5 trillion business travel industry. For over 55 years, they've been bringing together everyone from travel managers at companies like IKEA and Salesforce to suppliers like Sabre and major airlines. What makes Suzanne's work particularly fascinating is GBTA's recent Sustainability Acceleration Challenge, which attracted over 240 companies representing $14 billion in annual travel spend. Since business travelers are responsible for most airline profits and emissions, the work Suzanne is leading could transform the entire travel industry. Enjoy this conversation because Suzanne's insights on making travel smarter, not less, are exactly what our industry needs to hear. Suzanne, it's great to be speaking with you after meeting you a few times and seeing your enthusiasm about everything business travel. Can you please tell us, to those who may be unaware, what does GBTA do and your role at GBTA?
Yes, sure. GBTA stands for the Global Business Travel Association, and we're the only global association for professionals that work in either the buy or supply side of business travel. We are over 55 years old. I think this is our 56th year, and we started as the Passenger Facilitation Association way back in the US, and then over 10 years ago became a global entity. We operate in all regions of the world, I would say. So most active in North America, in Europe, Western Europe, in APAC as our newest region, and growing steadily in LATAM as well.
Well, that is indeed a very, very global footprint. What are some of the big trends you're seeing in the evolution of business travel in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, what I see for this year is really the overarching theme that we all need to travel smarter, and the trends around that certainly I think have been growing ever since the pandemic, but they're alive and well and very positive when we think about them. And that is certainly making sure the trip is needed in the first place. That's part and parcel of what our industry on business travel has always done. It has been cost related before, and now it has some other factors as well. All travel managers and the suppliers who serve them need to maximize resources, and traveler wellness is part of that. I think the second portion of that is to the trend that supports it is making sure that every trip is more productive. And that can mean adding on meetings within the same city or continuing on the journey to another city that maybe you'd have flown to or taken the train to or driven to for a separate meeting and just continuing on that journey. We're starting to call that linked trips. And then, of course, making sustainable choices when they're available, that it continues to be a trend that we see in transportation, in accommodation, and hospitality around it, certainly restaurants and others. And last but not least, and probably sooner than we think, technology is one of those things that always tends to upend and enhance what we're doing. And although we don't believe it replaces meeting in person, it can actually make those meetings better. And so things like personalized bookings, personalized choices around productivity preferences and sustainability will be something that we should watch for in the immediate future, but also in the long term as well.
I can definitely relate to some of these trends. I'm going to be in California for a work trip, which is on the West Coast, and I'm going to extend it by a couple of days to go see my mom in Vancouver. So awesome. The link trip makes complete sense. So I don't have to go, cross continent once again. So that completely resonates. Now, something you mentioned was around sustainability. I actually love your, I think, a check-in with Suzanne newsletters that I get in my inbox. And one of them said, I think you did a poll of 150 travel managers, and just 8% said sustainability was a priority. Is this a low figure? Has this doubled in the last few years? I'm a bit concerned with this number.
Yeah. The poll you're referencing came out in March 2023 when our work on People and Planet was really brand new. But what explains the low level for prioritization and sustainability is that travel managers were really in that question asked to pick their top two out of a wide range of priorities. And so it didn't make the top two. And what beat them out was cost savings and traveler experience. But a more recent study, actually in Q4 of 2024, has it at 19% of travel managers listing it as a top 3 priority. And there again, the question's slightly different, but they were asked to give their top 3. And in that case, it's over double what it was in 2023, if you think about it. And I think that reflects progress in the way of business travel, in that our industry, the business travel industry, is getting educated around and tackling the first steps in the sustainable travel journey. I think there will always be pressures in our industry to focus as much or more on the immediate asks of our C-suites, which are, cost containment, duty of care, safety, and other things, and the ROI of travel in the first place. But sustainability is becoming more frequent as a top priority.
Very interesting. You said this was 2023. Has this number changed in 2024, 2025? Do you have some trends there?
Yeah. So what I talked about was Q4 in 2024. That number was 19%. So
got it. More than double.
More than double.
Okay. That does make sense. Now, GBTA is, of course, working to educate and empower travel professionals to advance climate-conscious business travel programs. How do you do that?
Yeah, starting over 3 years ago, we stood up our GBTA Foundation, which had been sunset. I've only been here since about exactly 4 years ago, February of 2021. And a few months later, the foundation seemed like a great idea to bring back in terms of focusing on people and planet. And within the GBTA Foundation, we have a small but mighty team who has been focused on dedicated climate-related initiatives as well as people and workforce-related initiatives. And with that, we have a dedicated sustainability initiative aimed at driving climate action within business travel. And what does that mean? So really 3 levels we play at the Global Business Travel Association. The first is bringing the industry together, and that means across the full corporate travel value chain, buyers, suppliers, intermediaries, to foster collaboration and to jointly tackle cross-industry challenges. And that may sound easy, but it's never easy when everybody has a different definition of what that is, or their company has a different timeline of how they want to address that. So the second initiative that we have that we feel is our part of our very important mission is rallying key players around common standards. And that's something that associations can do really well. In our case, it's to move the $1.5 trillion business travel industry towards practices and suppliers that truly help decarbonize the industry. For sure, we need more solutions, and all of the solutions aren't there yet. You who cover and do a lot of things within the aviation industry would know that we don't have all the solutions yet. But the third and very important mission that we have is to build capacity at scale. And so that means leveraging our thousands of members across the globe, those regions that I talked about, and providing research and education that helps them start, advance, or finally accelerate sustainable practices in their program. We know already this, and thanks to the support that we get from airlines, hotels, travel management companies, car rental companies, tech companies, and other industry players, that they realize the power of coming together as an industry is important to help tackle these issues, to drive the conversation, to drive the ambition, and ultimately to drive the uptake of sustainable business travel practices. I think there's other things that we do, of course, that are certainly within the last year and a half, especially. It didn't take long for our foundation team, led by our fearless Delphine Milot, to start putting practical things in place for what we actually give back to the industry, whether you're a member or not. And so on the education front, to help travel professionals, there are several resources that we've developed and launched within the last 18 months, a toolkit with 12 different modules that help a travel manager to understand what and how to think about sustainability within their program. We also developed a new travel management practitioners course, which is all about sustainable managed travel principles. That's administered by our GBTA Academy. We've launched a benchmark of best practices, how companies who are further along in the journey, what were some of the steps that they took, and who were their advocates along the journey. And then an annual state of climate action within business travel reports, which certainly helps us to see how we're gauging along the way. That was in the first front, practical things that we provide to the industry. On the harmonization front, we continue to work across the industry. And in 2024, we released our industry's first ever sustainable procurement standards. We call it SPS for short, for airlines, hotels, and car rentals, to help corporate travel buyers worldwide make informed procurement decisions, and to also on the supply side, to actually help with the sometimes thousands of RFPs that they're getting with different questions that mean that they're one by one answerable questions, to help standardize what that set of questions are. So it helps both the supply side and the buy side to streamline the sustainable procurement process. It's a long
That is a lot. Yeah. That is a really, really long list. Now, one of the most interesting or exciting initiatives I came across was the Sustainability Acceleration Challenge that you recently launched. Are you able to dive a little deeper into this? Because I think this can be inspiring for a lot of other organizations as well.
Sure. It's something that we started developing about a year ago, and we launched it in November of 2024. It was co-funded and then co-developed by Accenture, and it was also the rest of the funding coming from our sustainability partners. The challenge was designed and is designed to mobilize organizations of all sizes and across all geographies to start, advance, and then accelerate the integration of practices to reduce their business travel emissions. And last year, which was our first year, we were super happy to get over 240 companies participating. And these companies represented a cumulative annual business travel spend of over $14 billion. So it's a great start as we think about where we're headed in covering the globe and all travel programs across the globe. The companies had to complete a maturity assessment that evaluated their organization's performance. And some of these categories were related to decarbonizing their business travel programs and what 15 action levers they're doing and what have they already started to do within their procurement program. We plan to run this every year going forward to track where we're at. We already have 25 companies who've publicly pledged to participate in it. And of course, dozens of others have privately pledged that they will continue to participate on this journey with us.
Wow, these are the kind of insights I think companies would truly value, not just about themselves, but potentially as a benchmark as well, what others similar to them are doing as well.
Exactly. And what I think we found as well, initial results show us that we have a long way to go. We developed the ranking basically is from 0 to 5, with 0 denoting no activity and 5 denoting the best leading practice in terms of mitigation. In our first year, 2024, our baseline year, the overall average was 1.3 out of 5, which shows that while some action is being taken and planned, and certainly some were above average and some were below, there is a long way to go and really an urgent need to turn commitments into real practice. And some of those, I think, lower hanging fruit are purposeful trips, what we just talked about. So being able to evaluate the necessity of the trip. And the good news is 79% of companies that have taken the challenge reported that they're already evaluating. They're asking employees and others on their teams who are traveling with their dollars and their budgets to make sure it's a purposeful trip. I think the other area is emissions tracking, and a majority of companies, 62%, are tracking their business travel emissions, and an additional 14% on top of that are planning to do that this year or going forward. Another area is point of sale activation, where there's some progress. 68% of companies have sustainability features included in their corporate travel booking platforms, and 22% of companies are looking to upgrade or even switch platforms that would have better sustainability features in the future. So there's lots of opportunity there and things that we can celebrate. Bigger opportunities, though, come in the way of, for example, engaging more with employees and making sure that they are aware of not only what is within their purview of choices, that they can already select some things over others, but I think also financial mechanisms in terms of aligning with accounting and finance teams at companies to be able to set internal carbon fees and budgets as a way to make sure that there are carbon budgets along with financial budgets. I think there's also a big need for us in terms of opportunity to harmonize demand signals. And so how are sustainable procurement standards being used so that suppliers start to see some really generalizable, but also some standards when they're getting sustainability questions and tracking of their performance. And then finally, certainly scaling the market for SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, is one of those other things. Only 12% of companies are currently purchasing something called sustainable aviation fuel certificates as a way to compensate their business travel emissions within that value chain. And while they spend an average of $400,000 annually on that, the practice is set to double in the next year, with another 15% of companies planning to be on the market for those SAF certificates in the near future.
Wow.
So
this is so interesting, right? I can't wait to see the pie chart and the charts around this when you release it. What stood out to me was two things. One is over 60% of business travelers or companies are tracking emissions or the climate impact from business travel. And I think this is really important. Just to zoom out, we are having this conversation here because business travel not only powers most of airline profits, business travel also is responsible for most of emissions because they're the frequent flyers. They're the ones who are traveling up front, for example. So having over 60% of the companies tracking and measuring their emissions up front or when traveling for business is so important because what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets addressed. And I'm delighted to hear some of these numbers that you found in this initial survey.
Well, certainly part of the driver for that are regulations. And so the EU's CSRD coming into play. Many of our members do business cross-border or have multinational instances of their company's activities or customers and other things happening, or doing direct business, of course, across. And I think the fact that even companies not based in Europe are subject to CSRD reporting requirements has certainly helped that number, because some of the early regulations are simply to start measuring, right? Measuring and then reporting. And then, of course, there are plans in place as solutions come forward for that carbon emissions to finally come down.
Wow, phenomenal. Now, we've spoken at large about business travel as a sector. When I was researching for this interview, and my team as well, we found some very unique clients that you work with. You've got everyone from Sabre, the corporate booking tool, to IKEA, to Salesforce. They seem to be in very disparate businesses, but they all work with the GBTA. How do you work with them?
Yes, specific to sustainability, all the major stakeholders in the supply and buy side are really at the table. They have a seat at the same table to make progress on this. And I think that is GBTA's unique role, that we work with these players together and we rally them around common goals. And I think a pragmatic approach is always really important. I would say we're not activists. What we are pragmatists. And as we think about where we can make a difference in standardization, where we can make a difference in taking inefficiencies out of what feels like a super daunting task, the companies that you mentioned, some of them sit on our sustainability leadership council, for example. Sabre is one of those sustainability partners alongside other GDSs, TMCs, airlines, SAF producers, and certainly categories like hospitality. And often their sustainability leaders are our advisors as we think about what the industry needs and how fast the industry of suppliers are willing to move. I think on the travel buyer side, and those would include IKEA, those would include Salesforce and others, they are certainly on the demand side. And in terms of their company cultures, what they see, whether it's purely scope 3 or whether it's largely, other areas that they're making faster progress, and travel in their scope 3 is making slower progress, I think it's a chance for us to learn about all of those best practices as well. And they sit around the table, whether it's a committee or whether it's advisors, whether it's participation in the acceleration challenge. Those are the ones who are the benchmark then for others who are still learning and making their way through their corporate travel continuum of how they get started and how they advance and accelerate.
We covered the corporate part. We covered the overarching numbers and the research. And thank you so much for being so well prepared for this interview, because we are diving a little deep here. I want to take a step back and go to some solutions. We look at different pathways airlines are following, from operational efficiencies to newer fleet to sustainable aviation fuels to even electric and hydrogen aircraft. Specifically, what role do you see sustainable aviation fuels playing in reducing the environmental impact of business travel? And are you seeing some signs on how this adoption of SAF can be accelerated?
Certainly, it's not the only solution, but it is an important and essential solution. And right now, it's really the most promising decarbonisation pathway for aviation at the moment as we see it. So with that in mind, GBTA wants to certainly make sure that the business travel industry plays an active part in scaling the SAF market. A lot of it is education, but a lot of it is making sure that corporate customers realize that they also have a very important role to play in this equation by stimulating the market and sending a clear demand signal. So, and at the same time, they can also compensate their scope 3 emissions by purchasing SAF certificates. So that's a key component of many corporate sustainability strategies and meeting their SBTI targets. Certainly to support corporates in this journey and to help them build a business case and really to assess options for SAF. GBTA is also going to be launching a new SAF Corporate Connect group this year in 2025 to exchange best practices between travel buyers and SAF experts. And I think also when it comes to the public-private component to this, because this can't just be done by private institutions, this also needs a big public component. GBTA is super active in terms of educating policymakers when we're in Brussels, when we're in Washington, D.C., and other world capitals to make sure that policymakers also understand that our industry moves the people who move the world. And as such, as you said, business travel is a key component to make sure aviation stays alive and well. And we need fast and easy access and more affordable access to SAF as we just don't have enough that is affordable at the moment.
Have you seen any encouraging signs of business travel actually influencing the supply or take-up of SAF?
Certainly what we see are there are some buyer groups that have certainly influenced individual airlines as they think about it. I see it at a local level where often the last mile is really the airport where the SAF becomes available. And in some cases where SAF is produced close by, there has been a great partnership there. But I think the real magic is that we need an accounting system. And there's been a huge call for the kind of credit tracking that you can buy SAF certificates. It's really the magic of SAF certificates, that it's not about actually putting your people on planes, that it's actually flying with SAF, but that you are the investment arm that lets other planes fly with SAF, whether or not your people are on board. And that kind of credit accounting is really the key where we see some companies have stood up and have been part of that.
Wow.
And without that, I think that's going to be the building block to help make sure that we have, the world runs on financial systems. And I think you would have seen that at Davos as well, that these are the world's movers and shakers. And without a globally connected financial accounting and other kinds of tracking systems, we won't be able to achieve tough goals within
Absolutely.
the next 5, 10, 25 years.
I think you're referring to book and claim here. SAF
Yes.
book and claim use has definitely grown. Is this something GBTA is supporting? And if so, how?
Book and claim has always been part of both our efforts to put things into events and have there be education sessions around it. Certainly, we work with companies directly who have formed partnerships to put these kinds of systems forward. And then certainly as we talk again to policymakers in Brussels, Washington, and other world capitals, that is one of the things that we are proposing and be a proponent of, that standardization of these systems. The worst thing would be is that governments come up with different book and claim setups, and that there's conflicting ways for you to buy and claim credit for the kinds of things that are supporting things like SAF. So we're advocating that there's harmonization across government regulations as well. So we're active in at least 3 different areas when you think about it. We ourselves don't advocate for one system over another, but what we really want is a harmonized set of systems across the board.
Got it. I think that makes sense. And thank you for being open to both of these. What about collaboration of travel managers? How can travel managers better collaborate with their company's sustainability team to ultimately drive meaningful change? Are there any examples you can share for example?
For sure, the collaboration is critical and underway. And some of the companies you mentioned earlier actually have chief sustainability officers, or they have sustainability programs that are looking at not just scope 3, but they're looking at all of their other scope 1 and 2 emissions as well. And so travel is a subset of that. But in some companies like financial services and professional services, it is the vast majority of the emissions that they need to mitigate. So in looking at net zero targets, they really need to have a decarbonization strategy for business travel. And in this context, or the role of a travel manager might actually not be the target setter. They might be the ones who are the mitigator to collect information and then inform, encourage, and engage travelers to travel more sustainably, and ultimately also to start selecting suppliers that are moving in that direction to have sustainable and carbon emissions mitigation strategies as well. So it's a partnership that we see across those the CSOs, as they've come to be known, and the travel managers. We do know some travel managers who actually, because the carbon the scope 3 are their vast majority, who actually may own the sustainability strategies at their company, and those become great spokespeople at our events and at other kinds of research and thought leadership papers that we're producing to be able to give best practice about how they marry travel management, which certainly 5-10 years ago seemed to be an adversary, to become an advocate for the kind of sustainability questions that are in play today.
Right. I've definitely seen this transition. You're absolutely right. We work with Salesforce and their head of sustainability, who's looking at scope 3 and hence a lot of business travel. And well, you were at the immersion together at their company with us, and I think that was quite an eye opener. It's really good to see the momentum there. Now, when I was at the World Economic Forum earlier this year in Davos, there were two big themes there. One was sustainability, and we spent most of this episode talking about that. The other was artificial intelligence. And I want to bring that in just from your perspective. Do you see AI playing a role in helping companies manage not just business travel, but also travel-related emissions?
Definitely. I don't know if the sky's the limit is a good analogy for a podcast about aviation, but it's certainly, I think, relevant here. AI holds such big promise. It holds threats as well that we need to figure out pretty quickly, but I think it represents in general amazing opportunities for companies both to manage their travel program better in general, but also specifically around travel emissions. So certainly on the buy side, the ability to get deeper data, predictive analysis around that data that will help to model emission reduction pathways and support better travel decisions. And I think, it's sort of a best practice consolidator, if you will, as it becomes more prevalent in decision making and strategy setting. I think it can include tracking carbon emissions for air, hotel, car, and rail travel, and making it available more broadly at the time of booking for optimized travel decisions by the travelers themselves. And I think, within our complex ecosystem within the corporate travel sphere, it's more complicated than a consumer decision because there's intermediaries along the way, including corporate booking tools and TMCs and others that set the policies for how that corporation expects you to travel. So all of that needs some time to integrate, but we're certainly excited to see AI to start getting used more broadly there. And it can even help, for example, within aviation specifically in optimizing routes so that, if 10 to 15% of emissions could be cut immediately because there would be more efficient air routes that could be flown, I think that's low-hanging fruit that we should be taking advantage of right away. And then I think in terms of landing on collective governance principles and harmonized methodologies, I think AI will certainly be helpful in helping travel policies to keep up with what some of those trends are and to be putting some of those solutions in place to tackle issues surrounding even things like energy usage for AI data centers. I think, maybe AI can help solve some of its own problems as we go forward and make those queries more sustainable in the way that they don't use this, ginormous amount of power to amass the best answers that someone is looking for when they're doing a lot of training on themselves.
Yeah, I think there are those low-hanging fruits, right? I remember the Roman roads in the sky have existed since 1960s. These circles around Heathrow, you might see a plane flying before landing. We don't need them anymore, right? And artificial intelligence can complement, not take away, complement air traffic controllers to smooth out these Roman roads. They need not be Roman roads. They can be really intelligent roads, RI roads, not necessarily artificially intelligent. So I think there's definitely potential there, and easy wins exist. Finally, what gives you the most hope for the future of business travel industry working together to power a net zero future for travel?
With my hat on with an association, which is a 501c6, it's a trade association by US IRS rules, and then our GBTA Foundation, which is a 501c3, in some cases a charitable
what's the
arm.
difference? What's the difference there?
A charitable arm. They're both nonprofits. They're both tax free organizations that are doing really essentially public good, as I see it. The association is focused on solving solutions for our industry and making sure that there's a private-public partnership in the way that keeps, in our case, travel working to help economies, to make sure the people that are working within our industry also can have pride in the industry that we're working in, and that we have the most productive, the most efficient, and let's not forget profitable companies by way of whether you're buying or supplying travel products. I think on the foundation side, what gives me great hope has been seeing, the 2.5 to 3 year journey that we've been on with our 501c3, is that, as I see it, the association is inward looking at itself as an industry, and the foundation is outward looking. And many of the things that we've been focusing on around planet and people are really bringing others into our big tent. And if I could make such a bold statement, with the kinds of procurement practices that we're espousing and looking at sustainability more broadly, if we can make the $1.5 trillion in spend of business travel be more sustainable, it will help the entire travel industry be more sustainable. And I think my optimism is by seeing all of the great suppliers step up to the table to want to be a part of this journey, both to educate as well as to be educated, to also make sure that they are at the forefront of what they're already being asked by buyers. And then seeing these buyer companies, some of the companies that spend the most on business travel globally, have a seat at the table to make sure that what we're doing is also meeting the needs of their programs and what their travel programs require, as they look to the future about where solutions are available and where they're not, and what are some mitigating strategies in the meantime, so that we're not doing nothing. And then the small and medium enterprises who have a seat at the table as well, when they think about, they have fewer resources, they have way few people on their team. What are some of the easiest things that they can do to get started? And they all are raising their hands with questions. And I think that learning environment and this willingness to teach each other has me hugely optimistic about what our potential is. And then I look at our toolkits and the things that we provided by the GBTA Foundation and our association. There are umpteen ways for companies and individuals to get involved at whatever stage of the journey they're with. And seeing, as we were in Copenhagen as part of a larger conference, but it was the first day before that larger conference came forward. We had over 800 people in a big room wanting to learn more, raising their hands with ideas and recommendations and questions and debates. There's certainly an active business travel community that wants to be a part of the solutions and not just the problems that some parts of the world see the business travel industry causing. And I think that, make sure that we're pragmatic as we look to what the solutions are ready, which ones simply aren't, and how can we partner with adjacent industries such as aviation and aircraft manufacturers and others to make sure that we're creating a future where business travel remains a force for good, because we learned during the pandemic what happens when there's no travel, and we certainly don't want to go back there.
Whew. That makes a lot of sense, and we definitely don't want to go back there. I think through this conversation, I'm convinced that business travel is a beacon of hope. Business travel is a catalyst for whatever aviation in general wants to accomplish. If it's AI, hey, try it out in business travel as a sandbox bus. If it's sustainability, try it out. And I love some of the things that you're doing where you're working with the acceleration challenge, for example, right? It's highlighting what some of the companies are doing. You're also running this as a nonprofit, hence being able to work with disparate participants from, IKEA to Salesforce. Their businesses could not be more different, yet they're both part of GBTA. This conversation has filled me with hopes, and I've really enjoyed our first few meetings, and I'm so glad we could finally speak in depth about business travel as well. Now, the final part of this interview is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know Suzanne a little better. And I'll ask you simple questions, and you can reply with short answers to that. So, for example, what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie, Indochine with Catherine Deneuve, set in colonial Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Have you been to Vietnam?
I have been to Vietnam, but long after I saw the movie. And it's all of the things I think of, colonial, there's travel, colonialism, there's travel, there's this social drama that's happening. And it just, faraway places feel closer when you see them in living color through drama.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. What about your favorite city, since we talked about travel?
Favorite city. So for me, it's so many. For me, I think at the top of the list would be Berlin, Singapore, Honolulu, and of course where I live, New York City.
Okay. Many of them. I'm glad you're living in one of your favorite ones. Or your favorite book?
Favorite book. I think for me, any favorite book would be fiction that gives me a strong sense of place, like travel does. I think I was, along with traveling, reading is probably my next favorite pastime. Most recently, I would have to point out, I loved reading The House of Doors. It's a book by Tan Chuan Eng, and takes place in pre-World War II Malaysia. And to fend off one of your next questions, my husband and I visited Malaysia for the first time on a blended travel trip last year. And so it brought home to me some of the great things that I noticed about Malaysia last year.
Fantastic. I'm loving these answers here. What about your favorite airline? Do you have one?
Favorite airline, given my position representing an industry that includes all airlines, I'm reticent to pick just one favorite. But I live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and so I'm flying most often out of Newark Airport, and I'll let you figure the rest out.
All right, sounds good. I think we've got an airline that used to carry a tulip on the tail. What is something that you do in your free time?
Free time. So you'll probably laugh at this. I'm either traveling or planning my next trip, but I think that's only a little partially tongue-in-cheek. I think the rest of my free time, reading, cooking, baking, walking, staying connected to family, and watching British crime series, which is probably my, when I've done all my email on a long plane ride home, I think that is my escape when I've got 2 hours.
Okay, I will come to you for recommendations in the future on that one. What is something you'd like to learn, Suzanne?
I studied it in college way back when. I'd like to learn how to speak French better. So that will take some practice and probably some immersion. But I'm pretty rusty. My German's really good. I married a German, and we raised our kids who are now adults to speak German. So my German's really good. But I do understand that Americans often have this reputation of only speaking English, and so I'd like to improve on my French.
Come to where I've been from. Come to Canada. We speak a bit of French
indeed.
there.
Yes, indeed.
And final couple of questions. What is the best advice you've received?
To sum it up, slow down to speed up.
Oh,
I think
nice.
That really means, don't rush to judgment. Don't rush to a decision. Don't pull the trigger before you've actually considered what else is going on. And I think that served me well in terms of being able to make smart, pragmatic, sometimes difficult decisions as a way to consider what else is going on.
Wow, fantastic. And final question. If we are speaking 1 year from now and we are popping champagne, what are we celebrating?
We would be celebrating that, specific to this conversation, over 300 companies will have participated in the Acceleration Challenge, and that we've ticked up from 1.3 average. Anything above that would be good. I think the other thing that we would celebrate is that we would have made it through, 2024 with, 3/4 of the world having voted, and that the world has stabilized a bit in terms of trade, in terms of what business travel means, and that business travel itself continues to be alive and well and progressing steadily on its major goals as we head to 2030 and then 2040.
Wow. Amen to that. I can imagine a future like that. Thank you, Suzanne, for giving us the time, sharing some of these original, wonderful thoughts, and diving deep into some of the initiatives you have been leading to make business travel better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashank, for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Mira Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Lihia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Driman is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.